Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards here, and this is the Ultraviolet Podcast. And today I am joined by the YouTuber Lost Futures. He runs a channel focusing on a lot of different stuff, but mostly politics, leftism, where he brings his history as a history teacher to bear on those subjects in a way that I find very interesting and engaging. And that's largely what we talk about in the episode today. We talk about his history as a history teacher in Canada and the Canadian education system and the problems therein that ultimately led him to leaving that industry and deciding to become a YouTuber, where he gets to educate people on the subjects he wants in the ways that he wants without being constrained by as you'll hear in the interview, a very tightly bound system that is not conducive to the type of education that he wanted to provide people, and for reasons that I think are perfectly understandable, as we discuss in the interview itself. We then go on to talk about doomerism and toxic masculinity, specifically as it relates to the debate sphere. And then at the end of the episode, we basically just go on a tirade trying to say the most egregiously demonetizable things possible, because I pretty much just decided that this interview was not going to get monetized because it says a lot of, we just cover a lot of ground that is not very friendly to the algorithm. So hot takes abound at the end of the episode. If that's what you're here for, you can go ahead and just skip right to those. But I think the whole interview is very good. I really enjoyed talking to Ibrahim. It was a really fun conversation. As far as content warnings go, we do cover some heavy stuff with systemic racism. We talk about mental health, PTSD, panic attacks. At one point, I talk about the triage process for mass casualty incidents in emergency medicine, and sort of casually talk about some very grisly stuff there that a lot of people would not like to hear casually discussed, but that's just how I relate to that information because of my previous career. And just all of that kind of stuff. Well, there's mentions of colonialism and just vicious racism, because we talk about a lot of historical figures who were involved in the colonizing of America. And yeah, so all that bad stuff. If any of that is going to cause you psychic damage, then by all means, feel free to skip this one. I won't take it personally. For everybody else, I will see you on the other side of the jump, and I will not waste any more of your time with the introduction, and I give you Lost Futures. Ibrahim, Lost Futures. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on. Oh shit! I just dropped something. It's fine. We'll pretend like this is all good. Everything's fine. Nothing's
All
going off
fine.
the rails. Going off the rails 10 seconds into the fucking recording. It's
It's a pleasure to be on, and
yeah.
and trust me, some things might fly here too.
Okay. Everything's spring loaded and we're just ready to. This is what happens when you're just always ready to go, when you're such a fucking professional.
Oh yeah,
You're
that's
constantly ready.
so true. I even had to switch my chairs because I knew it. Like my other chair, my gaming chair, would start to squeak because I rock it.
Uh,
Such a professional.
dude, I need to. No, let me tell you about how. So, like, I want to make sure, like, if for the people that watch the YouTube channel, this one's going to be like waveforms and stuff, but like you'll see in the intro, and if you ever seen the show, like I've got like this fancy light background that I set up recently. But this is such a fucking like um chop shop operation. Like I've bought things begrudgingly, and the chair that I am sitting in, I essentially stole from an EMS base. Like they had them like stacked up. There was like 30 of them. I guess they were replacing all the old chairs.
Yeah.
I don't know why the ones that they replaced them with sucked too. But this, I was like, can I just take one of these? And my supervisor was like, he just kind of looked at me and just like turned around. And so I just grabbed a chair and took it outside. And so I'm sitting on squeaky stolen government property right now.
Man, the chair that I'm sitting on was 100% taken from a school. It's even missing an armrest. Like, it only has one armrest.
Nice.
So I guess, like, the teacher, got so stressed that he just broke the armrest, and by
Uh,
the end of the year, I was like they put it out in the hallway, which meant, like, you could take it if you want, if no one's looking. So I was like, "Hey, that's a good chair. It's good for my back." I just
yeah.
grabbed it and ran.
Nice. I want to get one of those. Like, I think that's going to be like the next like big uh pro pro YouTuber purchase I make is like a chair that doesn't suck. But I don't. They're so expensive. Like decent
Yeah,
chairs are so expensive.
they are.
Like, and
And
there's no middle ground
and
either.
I'm so weird because I sit cross-legged sometimes on my chair,
Yeah.
and this chair is so small that I can't do that. So I swap between my gaming chair when I'm actually, like, gaming. It's
Uh,
it's such a pain.
so like I do like the one leg like underneath or like I cross like one leg.
Yeah.
So and this one works good for that, but if I actually want to like put my feet flat on the floor and like I can't. It like the back just like leans all the way back so there's no headrest and it's not good. Um so that might be a good it's not a good segue, it's a terrible segue, but we're going to use it as a segue. Is you stole a chair from school
I did.
and you used to be a teacher and now you're a YouTuber. um, so I thought,
Great
yeah,
segue, great
it
segue.
is. Yeah, I'm getting. You know what? Believe it or not, I'm getting better at them.
This is the best
Yeah.
I've ever seen.
So you were a history teacher, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like that
I
was
was a history and English teacher.
okay.
The way that it works here in Canada is that you teach your major and your minor in university.
Mm.
So you go out, you get an arts degree or a science degree, you do your major, you do your minor, and that's like your teachable subjects. Uh, the reason why I chose these two was because I actually thought I could change the world. I was like 18 at the time. You know, I didn't actually know what the education system looked like or the ins and outs of it. So I went into it thinking I could do this. I could change the hearts and the minds of the next generation and, be a good role model. Like, imagine me at 18 thinking that I ended up being one of the youngest teachers in my class, actually. I was 22 when I entered,
Mhm.
and everybody was above 30. And for a long time, they believed I was 30, like, until the very end. They thought I was 30 years old. You know, I acted like a 30-year-old man. I behaved like a 30-year-old man. I lectured like a 30-year-old man. And I came up to them at the end. I'm like, guys, how old do you think I am? They're like, you're 35, right? And I'm like, no, I'm 24.
That's what teaching does to you. Is it just makes you so haggard that like you look everybody looks like Steve Buscemi and they're actually just like 19. It's a rough job. I don't know how like I don't know how people do it. Like it's intense.
It's a rough job, and becoming a teacher in itself is also extremely tough
Yeah.
because, like, you have to think about it. This is like they legitimately bar it to the wealthy, rich white people, is how I saw it. People who work their daily jobs, who are trying to survive, are basically kicked out of the program because if you miss a day, like a single day of absence, you're kicked out. So if you like stack up these absences, right? Let's say you're working and you have class and you have to work. You are like I've seen kids, I mean not kids, I've seen teachers in this program just get kicked out and barred from teaching because the absence system is so rigid, right? And the way I saw is that it works perfectly fine for your wealthy middle class, upper middle class um a household, right? Like these older people go in, they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, they're pretty well off. They have a person in working for them. So they could attend every single class and do it 100% fine. But those who are struggling, those who are like those that the program really needs, right? Like you need indigenous teachers here in Canada. You need um adopt teachers or African teachers. And what I saw was that these people were getting continuously barred from going through the program. And that was one of like that first year was so tough for me because like I struggled teaching because I was in a super religious school and like mentored by these really white teachers. And around me I saw like people who befriended me just like drop out like flies.
Yeah.
And I say that and it just sucked and it demoralized me and made me think about like what exactly is the system we call education. It's a bit hypocritical because the entire program in itself claims to be super inclusive, super like they really wanted to push cross-cultural education.
Mhm.
And when I look at it, I'm like, okay, that sounds great. You're teaching these white people cross-cultural education, but it's not the white people who are going to go out there and teach the hard topics of, indigenous history or indigenous science or trans rights or trans liberation or any of that. Those teachers are not going to touch those subjects. They're actually just going to play it super safe, try and like they also have to survive and float in the world of teaching. But
Yeah.
those heavy topics that are important that this program is trying to push gets completely pushed out once you enter the field. Uh, so so I went into teaching to change the world. What I found out was that the system in itself was this racist, super white thing that is based off the military. We were trained like soldiers, basically. You go in, you wake up at 6 a.m. You do your routine. You get there at 7:40 ish, right? Because you have to be there like an hour before class.
Yeah.
Like huge quotation marks. I don't know if you can see it, but like student teachers were supposed to be there an hour before it all starts. When the actual teachers walk in like 5 minutes before, right?
Mm.
And if you come in late as a student teacher, you are ridiculed by the people in the school. You are looked at like the person who thinks they got it all under control. You're looked at the kind of worker that's slacking off, and they actually like drill you if you come in late or you come in right on time that you're scheduled to come in. So like the entire system, I found it super perplexing in a way. And there's also the idea of discipline, right?
Mhm.
And this depends on the school. In some schools, like here in Canada, in the province of Manitoba, the Bible Belt of part of the Bible Belt of Canada, there are some schools that are so strict in their discipline that do not focus on white people, but rather people of color. Like
Mm.
so part of me was looking at it as a teacher in the act of teaching, and I try to challenge this. Like, I try to teach Indigenous history. I took on the white students who are like, "Yeah, but what about those settlers and those
Mhm.
hunters and the fur trade?" Like the stuff that you typically learn about in Canadian history about like civilization, the act of conquering the West, the idea of, you know, basically creating the thing that is known as Canada. For me, I was like, yeah, we already know that story. You've been told that story a billion times in your life. Here's something else. And and as a student teacher, my mentors hated that. Like I had this really white, and I keep saying white. I wonder if your viewers are going to get really angry at me.
I don't give a shit. It's fine. Uh, I I'm trying to cult I'm in my hate watch era. I like I'll have had let's see, prior to you airing, we'll have had FD and me ragging on Debate Bros, and we'll have had a World to Win talking about like communism and yeah, at this point, like I don't give a shit if people don't like
Nice.
whatever.
So for your viewers out there who don't know me, I should probably explain why I'm saying white because I sound like I am white, kind of, because I was raised and went through education through the educational system, through university. I was taught how to talk, I was taught how to write, uh, which are like some in the wild. If I encounter a Arab and I tell them my name, I'm like, "Hey, my name's Ibrahim," and they're like, "No, no, it's not. Are you sure it's not George?" And I'm like, "Excuse me?" They're like, "You talk like a white man." And I'm like, "No, man, I'm part Syrian. Like, I could talk Arabic. Like, what are you talking about?"
Mhm.
Like there are times in the wild where I do get called, white, and
Mhm.
it's something that I wanna touch on in the future about how Arabs sometimes do get the white pass. Like, they blend in so much that they're not seen as Arabs. They're seen as, like, this white complex thing. Anyways, so I'm part Arab, part Syrian, part Lebanese. Um, and for me, like I say part because nationality for me is super tough.
Mhm.
It's like there are times where I'm like, what the hell am I? Uh, Part of my family is they're not Russian. They're like Circassian. They're like from the mountains of Georgia
Mhm.
in the Caucasus. So like part of my line stretches there, but also, I'm also part what the French call here a métis, which is like for a lot of uh, Canadians that know the term, they think like French and Indigenous hybrid,
Mhm.
which becomes métis, this mixed blood kind of being. But with me, it's actually like a Lebanese man and an Indigenous woman. So the
Mhm.
hybrid, it challenges the known hybrid in Canadian stories that the French traders came in, they created the settlement in Manitoba called the Red River. The Red River became Métis because the French and the Indigenous people mingled, they got along, which is very rare. But with me, it's like you have Arab fur traders coming from Lebanon, going into like northern Alberta and mingling with the indigenous people up there. So when I talk about white, there's like complexities of white, right? There's like the mentor that I had was this white Ukrainian Canadian who was super patriotic to the nation, super patriotic to the church. Absolutely loved talking about his church in Ukraine. But the way he saw me wasn't white. He knew that I was Métis. He knew I was Arab, and the way that I showed it was how I challenged history. I went into his classroom, I took it over in his view, I took it over. I taught these kids such a fun way of learning history, and I challenged everything he taught, right? Like he went through the textbook. I was like, "Okay, cool. Let's read some comics, right, about indigenous stories. Let's
Mhm.
read some picture books. Let's do something different that is actually fun." And challenging that status quo isn't easy as a student teacher. What you're supposed to do is follow the mentor. You're supposed to teach his way. You're supposed to open that textbook and just follow him step by step by step by step. And you have to also mend and blend his history. Like if he's teaching history in one way, you have to replicate it. For me, I was like, no, screw that, F that. I'm not doing that. That's not actually what happened. That is
Mhm.
not the true. And in my next video, I talk a lot about narratives, but in creating a narrative, you have to omit part of the narrative, right? Sorry, I'm going off the rails a bit, but
No, you're good.
but
Um, I do actually, just one quick question.
sure, go ahead.
So what we're describing now, this, student teacher thing, does this take place after undergraduate and you are now teaching high school students, or are you teaching undergrads? Like, where exactly are you in the teacher, like, I don't wanna necessarily use the word hierarchy, but like.
So the way it works is that you finish your undergrad and then you enter the program of education.
Okay.
In the program of education, the reason why it's like military school is because you do all your coursework in 3 months,
Mm,
for like 5-on-5 classes in 3 months, and then you enter the school system for 2 months each semester. So it would be like October to December. I'm in the actual classroom teaching with my mentor. So
Okay.
that's kind of how it works and where it fits.
And
Um,
you're teaching undergraduate students at that point.
I'm teaching high school students.
High school
You're
students. Okay.
because the university pairs with the school system here.
Okay.
So they basically integrate us student teachers into the system to work with real teachers and real students.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
So the way it works is that first year you're only supposed to take like 25% of the responsibility of a teacher, and then as you go up through semesters, you're up responsibility. So like second semester you're given 50%, third semester 75%, and then your final semester you're hitting 100% of the duties. You're doing everything this mentor is doing. You're basically the aid that your mentor gives you kind of relinquishes as you go on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that tracks.
But in terms of hierarchy, it doesn't matter, is what I found. Even if you're in your 4th year, you're still looked down upon by the staff and by the school. The thing that changes is how, because they also measure you if they want you in their school. Because like the entire program you're going through to get hired in a school. So by the end of it, if you're in a school, you wanna get hired into that school, so you make yourself as advertisable, as great for them to hire you into it, right? So you get integrated into that school and you become part of it. You become you become part of the family, so
Yeah.
to say.
It so it seems like all of the obstacles that you've described seems like this is something somewhat mirrored in my industry, or my old industry, of emergency medicine, specifically EMS. But it seems like on the one hand, there is this massive shortage of personnel who are capable of doing the job and who want to do the job. And then on the other end of that is a system that seems almost custom made to keep people from wanting to do the job. And the link up there is very odd to me. Like, is there like a structural reason for that, or like, what are your thoughts on like why that system is designed that way? Because everything you've just described sounds to me like a system that is unaware that it is hemorrhaging teachers, but I'm sure it has to be. So, like, I don't like what's the
I think it's very aware of what it's doing.
mm,
Part of it is the way the role of education in making a country and making the direction of a country.
mm,
What Canada wants to do is because it's all about creating a narrative and teaching that narrative is how I see it. If you do get a diverse group of people into the education system, they will challenge that narrative. They will teach something else, right? So the way I see it and the way that I experience it, because at some point when I after I quit, I became a sub. And as a sub, I basically journeyed all over my city to see what these schools were like. And what I saw was that the system was replicating itself in every single school. Teachers were teaching the same things, mostly because they were pressured. And I would ask, like, hey, I'm just a sub. I'm a random guy. I want to learn about why you guys are teaching this, you know? And for them, they look down at subs. They think that we can't really teach. We don't know what we're doing. And what the teachers told me was one, it's super easy to just follow the person who's in charge of the history department, right? You
mm,
go in there, they give you the stuff, you teach. It's easier to teach about, and I went into like this was like height of Black History Month in Canada, and these teachers were teaching about Eleanor Roosevelt rather than Martin Luther King or Malcolm X.
hmm,
And yeah, I was perplexed. I was like, okay, but like I came in to one class and they're like, we're learning about Eleanor Roosevelt, and I threw that lesson plan out. I was like, no, today we're learning about Malcolm X. I may not be the right person to be teaching this, but it's Black History Month. You're not supposed to be learning about a white woman who may and or may not have helped Black people. Like, what's the importance is the African American struggle, and you are supposed to be learning about that. And it's super odd because You would think teachers would be teaching that, but instead they're teaching what is most comfortable with them. The way I see it is that in order to change this, and this gets down to systems and their roles in it all. Like it's systemic is kind of what the root cause of it all, and kind of what disheartened me in going in there and changing the system. Because you would hope that African American, or not American, Afro Canadians or indigenous teachers or trans teachers go in there and they teach the things that they want to teach. They change the narrative. And I've seen many, like I taught with a non-binary teacher who did that, who did change and challenge the narratives that were being told. And yet it's such a work loaded job that it's almost impossible to teach something new. It's basically like a job that is sink or swim. You're working more than you ever think you would ever work, and it's normalized.
Mm,
So, and you have to think about comforty, like the comfort level of these of African Canadian teachers or Indigenous teachers who are in most cases not in a comfortable space to be working only educate like only teaching jobs. They're working something else on the side. So what ends up happening is that these teachers in who are in a situation of poverty or who are poor end up sinking in their teaching because it's such a work loaded job, right?
mhm.
That you have to stay on top of it every single week. And so if you're trying to teach something new and create something new, you have to work overtime. So you go home and you work. This is what happened to me because I refused to follow the book. I refused to, use sources from white teachers. I was creating something new, so I went home every single day and I created basically a new unit to teach. But that that makes you sink in the work and it drains you. So what a lot of teachers do when they're in such a situation is throw out their idea of challenging the system. You become part of the system. You do what is easy to survive. And it's like I'm not blaming any of these people. It's normal. You're getting such a huge load of work for not the best pay, right? Because you're coming home and you're working on top of that, 10-hour shift that you worked in the school of teaching.
Yeah.
So and you have a life of your own, many of these people. They have kids, they have family, their spouses. Like, they have a life on their own. And so in order to survive and swim, so to say, they follow the path and they teach what is the status quo. It's really complex and it's really challenging to look at, but like those that do make it, that's kind of what happens. And it is very much systemic and it is very much how the thing is designed. Because if you think about it, if teachers only taught 10 hours a day and did not have to work themselves overtime, they could do anything. They
Mhm.
could work comfortable, they could work comfortably, they could teach what they want, but the system normalizes this overwork. It's normal to go home after school or stay in school and work your butt off. Like
Mhm.
like as a teacher, I would be I'd be congratulated for staying in the school to finish up the work that I had left. Like, it
Yeah.
was super weird. Like, like, the principal would be walking out, he'd peep in my classroom, and he'd see me working on this unit, and he'd be like, "Wow, great job, Ibrahim. Loving to see you working, not in the hours that you're contracted to work." And I'm just sitting there looking at this guy like, "Really? Really, man?
Yeah.
This is something that should be praised."
Yeah. Yeah, it's, in EMS, there's a culture of, um, working overtime and, like, being everybody is, like, sort of competing with one another to see who can work the most hours, because that's the only way to really make ends meet, and it turns into a really toxic culture. But, yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you're describing is, it it seems like it's very I'm sure that it serves a number of different purposes. The one most obvious one being that only certain people who are the types of people who are going to want to teach the historical narrative that the system approves of are the ones that sort of matriculate to the top. And find success in that system, and then the other is that I'm sure it also serves as like a reinforcement mechanism of, like, if you don't want to do this our way, then I mean, you're basically pretty much always on the verge of financial insolvency if you buck any trends. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's
Th-
fucked up.
It is, and teaching history is so hard. Like I
Mhm.
sometimes I wish I became a science teacher because you look at those kids that go into science class to play with like chemicals and fire. Like I taught science in my student year as a student teacher because I was kicked out of the history class. Like that Ukrainian guy,
Yeah.
he kicked me out of his class for teaching the kind of history I taught. By the end of that semester, I got kicked out. I was banished from teaching history in that school, and he was the only teacher that taught history. So I went into the science teacher, who's this really super cool guy who had a really big obsession. Like he was a workaholic. He basically slept in the school. Like it's funny, but it's also super sad
Mhm.
because he tried to normalize the grind culture to me, and I was like, "No, man, I'm just gonna finish this lesson plan and go home and play some games."
Yeah.
So I went in and taught this grade 9 science class, and this is kind of where the legend began, where I became like the storyteller teacher. And the way I taught science was by telling stories to these science kids about these grumpy, cranky, crusty old scientists. And it was so much fun teaching science in comparison to teaching history because they're actively playing with science. They're actively creating something, right? It's almost
Mhm.
like they're learning through fun. They're learning through creativity. It's like active learning through creation. Teaching history in contrast is so much harder because you have to engage the student. You have to, but by engage I mean like you have to keep them awake and you have to keep them interested,
Yeah.
right? And the current model, the textbook model, struggles with that so hard. And part of it, it's easy for the student. They come in, they read the textbook, they answer these silly questions about who killed the beaver, who skinned the beaver, who sold the beaver, fur trade stuff,
Yeah.
and then they walk out and they're done. They got some easy marks. They're done with their history. So in part, I was like, okay, how do I challenge these these students? How do I actually change their perception of history? And so creating that was the toughest thing in it all.
Yeah. And that, I guess that ultimately led you to the YouTubes where you have a bit more freedom in what you can do, or like how did that happen? Because that's a pretty big jump.
It's a huge jump. Part of it was my fear. There was a really big fear that was going on. And this was before January 6th. What I was seeing
Mhm.
in the school system was the radicalization of the youth. And I talk about this in my next video a bit, but it's the idea that these people were being influenced by early debate bros, early SJW culture, early Peterson, Shabibo, all these people. Like it was a group of people that would influence these really like they were 16, 17, 18 maybe. And they would come into my class and they would they would be extremely racist and extremely rude and start debating me on me. They'd start debating me on factual history. So before January 6th, I was like, okay, this is weird. They're getting super radicalized. Can the education system actually challenge this radicalism? Right?
Yeah.
The answer was yes and no, because the other half was those being radicalized and being changed and impacted and affected by George Floyd. Um,
Mhm.
and I had like a guitar teacher who worked beside me. Like me and him were best buds, and we hit like when I would jump into his school, he would tell me about what he was doing and how it was affecting people through music, and how he would change minds by, introducing them to rap and in music that really mourned the death of the struggle. And I
Mhm.
thought, like, wow, that is super cool. On one hand, I'm seeing people who are being radicalized by this right wing manosphere kind of group, And on the other hand, you have this teacher who is actively challenging and affecting students and radicalizing them to a more leftist, progressive kind of stance, right?
Hmm.
So I thought, okay, as a history as a history teacher who is at the point like completely broken down and exhausted by the education system, can I still make this work and survive? The answer I came to was no. The the and part of me transitioning was this radicalism, but it was also the idea of sinking and swimming. The work I put into teaching at the end of the day gave me uh like this may be like a big trigger warning for you to tell people, but I started having like PTSD, and panic attacks like from teaching. This is kind of why I say it was like we were soldiers putting being
Hmm.
put into the field during COVID. Was that yeah, we're working on COVID. We're working in COVID. Yeah, we're going offline and online. But at the same time, the level of work still maintained. So by
Yeah.
the end of 2020, I was facing panic attacks on a daily basis. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up in the mornings almost like falling asleep on my way to work. Like I'd be driving to my school and I'd be sleeping.
Yeah.
So by the end of 2020, I was so worn down that I thought, okay, is it possible for me to continue teaching with this amount of work? And for me, it was impossible to stop it. Like I would come home after school, plan the next week, and then I'd do this daily, like day after day, weekends too. Those week breaks they give us, winter
Mhm.
break, fall break, spring break, every single day, I was working myself to the bone. So by the end of 2020, I was like, okay, I I don't have a heart or a soul to teach. Like I don't have it in me to pump in almost like 17, 18 hours a day to teach. And it sucked. Like it sucked so much that I quit. I went in and I by the end because they tell you, "Hey, do you want to come back?" I was like, "No, I'm not coming back. I'm done." Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna teach. I'm not gonna work myself to the bone. I'm not gonna normalize this culture that you're putting in on teachers. Like, we're expected to come home every single day, work till a till like 10:30, go to sleep. Like, that's not normal. That is not how it should be. And teachers are getting impacted by this shit.
Yeah.
Like, because I know and I spoke with other peers that went through this system and got jobs and started teaching, right? They were mentally getting impacted by this work. And sure, we have a union. Sure, we could talk to the union. Sure, we have therapists. But at the end of the day, the union and the system work together to basically work us to the bone. So I quit and I started making YouTube videos around 2020 explaining my situation. And my first video sucked. They're about like the heart of the teacher being lost. Like I was so lost. Like my name is Lost Futures after coined after Mark Fisher, but I was so freaking lost. I was like, man, teaching was my dream. I wanted to change the world. Now what I do, I can't. I don't know where I'm going. I don't
Yeah.
know what to do next. So I went to YouTube and started making videos for it. That's kind of how I became Lost Futures.
Yeah. It's actually not that dissimilar from my my journey from ambulance to YouTube. I was equally uh burnt out from like 2 years of doing that with COVID and lack of resources and being overworked and underpaid, and I was starting to get like I was having panic attacks going to calls, and like it just it was fucking awful. And yeah, I just was like, fuck this, I'm done. And I got out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it felt like for me, it felt like a huge weight got off me.
Yeah.
Like, for once, I was actually able to sleep without thinking about a classroom or how the kids will react to this idea or to this new concept. or how I'm gonna tell Jimmy to not be
Yeah.
racist and to kind of calm himself down, or how I'm gonna tell Carter back there to kind of wake up when he falls asleep every single time. Like, sorry, Carter, I'm just gonna call you out for this, but but I also tried to fall asleep with you. Like
Yeah.
I actually cut this out. That sounds kind of freaking weird.
Yeah. You were falling asleep as well, not, like, snuggling up to him on the single
Exactly.
bench like
I
a
I would
yeah.
hide in my corner and I'd try to sneak in a nap while you guys did all your work. And I'm pretty sure some of you have caught me doing this, but there were some days where I was like, "Okay, folks, we're gonna watch a movie," and I'd dim the lights, like turn off all the lights, and I'd go into my corner and they'd watch this war movie, and I'd just be like snoozing there.
Yeah, no, the little mobile movie cart for, teachers having a rough one, like, the squeaky wheel of the teacher is not in the mood.
Oh,
Yeah.
I had a hard drive, but
Yeah.
I was like the modern teacher. And then some of them would actually ask me. They'd be like, "Hey, teacher, where do you get this movie from? I couldn't find it anywhere on YouTube." And I'd be like, I just found it laying around there in the internet, and I grabbed it."
So now you have left the horrific world of the Canadian educational system, and you are neck. You're several body parts deep into the YouTube, uh, and like, what would you say, like, your like primary, like, if you had to describe your channel, like, what would you tell folks?
Lost Futures was created in hopes to create a future,
Mm,
like create a vision of a future. The way I saw it, and I kind of started adding on Mark Fisher and Jacques Derrida. There's this concept of hauntology, this idea of haunting, this idea that there's this possibility that we've lost the future and we're entering a phase where there is hopelessness, there is doomerism, there is this depression that is just looming over people's hearts and minds.
mhm,
And throughout my masters, I started encountering refugees, statelessness people, people who lost their homes, lost their life, and they also were being impacted by this haunting that they no longer have a future or a place to live. And so in the beginning, I didn't actually know what this channel was supposed to be about. But after going through masters, I kind of learned that as a auto person, I have to create a culture and a voice for histories to be spoken about, like histories that are completely forgotten, that are completely negated, but are actually secretly haunting us in the background, that are secretly looming in the background, that are not that people know is there, but they don't actually think about it. And this is also the haunting of the loss of a future. And so when I came back to it, I thought, okay, people are still being plagued by the black pill or the doomerism or this doomer phase. So how do I combat that? So I went into creating lost futures in order to create a vision for finding the future and helping people who are lost, who don't know what is next, who don't know what the future is going to look like, and to give them a bit of hope that we can still save it and we can still create something that is salvageable in the makings of community and mutual struggle. So that was my path and my vision in creating Lost Futures. Secretly, though, I also like as an artist, as a person who writes essays, who taught English language arts, who wanted to be by the end of the by the end of teaching and masters a writer. I also wanted to affect people. I wanted them to watch my videos and not to just learn history like a lot of people teach it, but be affected by it and be affected by the struggle of these people. And this affect kind of section plays a really vital role because what I'm trying to do is fight a thing called severance. And this is something I'm going to talk about in a future video months from now. but I feel like and by the way, the show Severance
Mm.
stole my idea. Like, I created Severance, the idea, I coined it before they released that show. I Googled Severance and I found the show Severance, meaning that I created that idea before.
Well, I have not seen or actually heard of the show. I am in a media uh like dead zone. So feel free to explain it to me because I have
Oh,
never heard of the
it's
show.
so good. It's so good. It's about and it's very different from my idea, Severance, thankfully. It's about these workers who work for this ominous corporation, but they are severed workers. Like, they go into their workplace and they forget about their real life. So
Mm,
when they're at work, they don't actually think about their families, their dogs, their cats, their loved ones. They focus in on work, and they're prisoners to work. So what happens through the show is that they start rebelling against this corporation because they know that they are severed. They
mm,
want to know what is on the outside. They want to know what is this weird corporation that has basically hijacked their minds are doing. And so they want to unsever themselves from this from work and from the corporation. So it's like a workers rebellion kind of show. It's super good. I forgot who is it directed by. He was in Tropic Thunder. The Zoopedia guy?
let's see. TV series. It is Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Surprisingly, it is directed by Ben Stiller. And
Huh.
yeah.
That is, I'm going to be honest
And
with you. That is not the name I expected to pop up when
I
I
think
Googled.
the main character is also called Mark,
Huh.
so he might be just like you,
Nice. That is,
except he's not bald. He has
oh,
hair.
well, that's close enough. Was it Adam Scott?
Yeah, it's
Is
Adam
the,
Scott.
huh.
They have some really good actors, and
Yeah.
the I'm gonna kind of like fanboy over the show a bit, but the direction and the shots are just amazing, just stellar kind of stuff that you wouldn't see in a TV show. It's also done by Apple, so that means that you don't actually have to, worry about it at all. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. So is that you said it's different from your conception of the concept of severance? Like,
Yeah, Severance for me was created in respect to how our relationship is to the wild and to nature and environment. In my perspective, we are being severed from feeling and caring about the world as it is by oil by by huge corporations and politicians. The idea is that, and this could be used in all forms of situations. But for me, when I studied it, affect basically severed us and people from the the environment, making it so that there's this dissolute place in Canada, North Canada. Nobody apparently lives there, right? Like, quotations on lives there, because of course people use the land and live on it. Like, indigenous people use
mhm,
it all, but we're told that this place is desolate, it's up there, it's uninhabitable. You don't have to care about it. You don't have to care about anything. We're just gonna go up there, we're gonna be so kind to the environment and pull out the oils and the minerals and the uranium, and you don't have to and you're not gonna be told about this, but if you're told, you don't have to care because we have this all in our hands. And so we're conditioned to sever ourselves from the environment and from other beings, such as like buffaloes, wolves, other animals, and other people who don't actually directly affect us. And
mhm,
so those that don't directly affect us, we get severed by them. And so severance for me became this idea that people were not being affected enough to care about other people and other beings. And so Lost Futures aim in affecting people is to unsever them from these people, to make them care about immigrants, to make them care about trans people, to make them care about those who are suffering and are under oppression. And
yeah.
yeah, that's basically my idea of severance. I'm wishing to flesh it out in the future. But I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a fun and creative.
Yeah. I've heard the term that you said before, a couple of times. I'd never I'm unfortunately not a big reader. I don't have a lot of time. And I also just it's something I should do more of, but I have not engaged with as much as I should. But I've heard the term hauntology a few times. And The way that you describe it, I think that's a very good description of the way a lot of people, particularly in the Western world, feel about, the future that we're headed towards. Is there's this sort of nebulous, looming disaster that we're all just sort of slowly meandering towards, and nobody can figure out how to stop it. And that's we're all just like haunted by that daily, and it really does a number on, I think, oh, it's just this pervasive miasma that we're all floating through.
Yeah, yeah. It is. There's I I first encountered it with Mark Fisher, who talks about it through music. And for me and a lot of theorists, we're kind of like, no, no, Fisher, you're kind of wrong about that. Like in his sense, he was saying that the people now are unable to create new art because we are so reliant on remixing and reusing stuff from the old era, from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, which is kind of true to extent with, like, if you look at like film remakes and the plague that they kind of brought,
Mhm.
maybe not plague, but the reliance on remaking stuff from the 80s, remaking stuff from the 90s, and just remodeling it to look in a modern kind of way. So he's kind of correct on that, but at the stem of it of being unable to create new art, Fisher was unable to see the stuff that's happening. Well, I mean, he can't see it. Rest in peace, Mark Fisher. But if he did live to this day, he would see creators on YouTube creating new forms of art that are just continuously evolving to to a point that kind of relinquishes his idea of hauntology. The
Yeah.
other, but he also borrows it from Derrida, and Derrida's version is kind of like my version. He The way that Derrida talks about it is in terms of communism, that the West and European countries are still haunted by communism, by the future that were lost, by lost futures, right? That there are some
Mhm.
people out there who think about the future that could have been if communism didn't if the USSR didn't dissolute in the 90s.
Mm.
That could have brought more possibilities to and more futures to an extent in our current times.
Mm.
But at the same time, Derrida passed away in the early 2000s. And so hauntology kind of is an idea that kind of just, slips and passes along people,
Mm.
and it has to be continuously reformed and reapplied to the current time, right? Because like in your if you're looking at it right now with the wave of leftists, whether they be in America or all around the world, the hauntology that Derrida speaks about is coming true to an extent, but also that it didn't fully die at the end of the the Soviet Union. The the history and the messages of those peoples are still being carried on to this day and are still being applied in variety of communities. And this may be like the divide between academia and the stuff on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like Derrida, Mark Fisher are high academics who were so ingrained in theory and so ingrained in academic life that they might have missed what was actually happening on the ground with actual people who were long ago in the 90s, in the 2000s, creating mutual aid groups and creating support networks all around the world, really.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think, that I mean, there's just a lot there. I've never, personally been one to hang a lot of hopes and dreams or even, like, bemoan necessarily the loss of the USSR, as like a I know it holds, like, a special place in the heart of a lot of, lefties, and, for some good reasons. I don't and maybe it's like the, like, tiny little anarchist that lives in my heart, but, I just don't really put a lot of stock in, like, these huge cultural hegemons that, sort of, like, seek to move the world in conjunction with their polarity of power. I think that and to be fair, the USSR did a lot of things to support socialism globally, that
Yeah,
were good. It also did a lot of bad shit, in my opinion. I just
no, 100%.
I don't, I wish that we lived in a world where what I am haunted by politically is not the loss of the USSR, it is that the loss of a multipolar world in general.
Yeah,
And I think we might be headed towards one of those again, but not necessarily in the best way.
yeah,
I don't know. I think we're we're headed towards a future that is, in my opinion, very, very dark, and
yeah.
I think it is, it breeds doomerism, and the challenge is to try and have hope for, you know, to have hope in spite of and in the face of what is very obviously a looming storm.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, a lot of these and Derrida and Fisher aren't I wouldn't say they're fans of the USSR. They're mostly talking about it in terms of hope of creating like the hope that the USSR brought in challenging capitalism
Yeah,
and
yeah,
challenging this idea of the Iron Curtain of capitalist realism. To
yeah,
them, that was the USSR in itself as an entity stood as a hope and as a beacon of hope for a different world than the one that we live in currently. And
yeah,
so for them, this was also like a big discourse as this is the big a big part of the discourse here is Francis Fukuyama's The End of History, the last and the stand of the last man, where he
mhm,
kind of says, okay, the USSR is done. This is the time for USA hegemony. I don't know if I said that right, but USA domination and liberal domination. We're basically going to go into all these places in the Balkans and in you know Kazakhstan and all these places and insert liberal democracy, and it's going to flourish, and the world's going to be so much better. And
yeah,
no way is this modern Russia, this capitalist Russia, going to invade Ukraine and cause this huge war and global catastrophe. No way. They're going to be part of the
yeah.
liberal party, and they're gonna bring freedom and justice to the Russians.
Is Fukuyama still alive? Like,
He is still alive, and he's on Twitter, so if you
oh
want,
god,
go
I
bully him.
wonder, like, what is he like right now? Like, because I don't think any one person has been proven so demonstrably wrong as as
I think
Fukuyama,
I think he's on Twitter right now, just,
just posting through it. We're just we're just careening towards well, we're not even careening, we're just, like, very slowly walking or being walked, I should say. We're being walked towards this future of, you know, essentially just neo-feudalism,
yeah,
by various state actors, the US, Russia as well. China is, it's kinda well, who knows how China's gonna go,
yeah, we
like,
don't know.
they're trending towards more of, more and more, what's the term that they use for their, like, mixed economy? Dangus, I think. I'm
Yeah,
not an I don't wanna pontificate on China because I don't know enough
no,
about them.
same here.
Uh, but yeah, I don't know, and maybe that's just I live in the imperial core and I see the way of life that I have known, being put to the chopping block, and maybe my own doomerism is just a symptom of, you know, privilege of having been in a place that made most of the things that I associate with the quality of life via extraction. So I don't
Yeah.
know. It's very hard to form a coherent picture about the world in the future right now, which I think is one of the problems. Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the importance of of hope, which is so tough in these days to have, I feel. But I
Yeah.
think that part of that is having a community, and also how community in itself connects to severance. Because what a lot of people who are going through these emotions feel is that they're isolated, they're severed from other people, they're severed from their communities. And so in being isolated, they're able to be like flung through the storm that is doomerism.
Mhm.
And so part of the solution, hopefully, is creating communities that, you know, pull people out of this mindset and having them believe in hope, which should be should be a name. I
Yeah.
talk about this in my next video, and I don't mind talking about it here now, but it's, I talk about how tough it is to pull people who are so-called like black pilled or are part of the manosphere or insold or in, the circles that are doomer. Like it's so tough to pull them out because they themselves resist being pulled out, you know?
Yeah.
Like they resist it so much because they believe in a future that is lost and there's no longer anything for us to do. And so when I talk about this in my video, I'm like, yeah, we're trying to create positive male figures. We're trying to create communities. But at the same time, like black pill people, doomerists are so tough to pull out and to help out.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if I tend to approach some stuff like this with a like a triage mentality. Like the the way like triage works in like a disaster type situation or like a mass casualty incident is well for like a mass casualty incident is defined in the rescue circles as any situation that overwhelms your resources. So if you have, you know, 100 people are injured in like a terrorist attack and you've got like 10 ambulances, that's a mass casualty.
Yeah.
But if you show up on an accident scene and you've got one ambulance and there are five injured people, that is also a mass casualty because you don't have the resources to deal with that. Um, and anytime you're in a situation like that, you have to triage. And depending on the severity of, injuries and what resources are available, you're going to have to make decisions that in other circumstances would not be ideal. So like um so like just to the sort of the standard the way the triage thing works is like you've got green, yellow, red, and black. Green is you're walking wounded. So like you walk up and you say like, "Hey, anybody who can hear the sound of my voice, if you're able to walk, go stand over there." And
Yeah.
everybody that walks over there, they're green. We're not going to necessarily mess with them right now. Okay, so everybody that's left is somebody who is not able to follow commands for one reason or another. And now you have to
Mhm.
figure out, are these people, do they have like a broken leg, which is bad, but it's not life threatening? Do they have a life threatening injury that is going to kill them in a very short period of time? And those people are your reds. Those are the people you evacuate immediately. And then you have the people who are uh, critically injured to the point that in order to save them would take all of your available resources. They theoretically could be saved, but to do so would basically sacrifice everybody else who's critically injured. And so those people are your black tags. Those are the
Yeah.
people that you just say, you might have a heartbeat, but you're dead. Like
Mhm.
you're going to die, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
So, like the for instance, in like a mass casualty trauma response, one of the things that you'll do is you'll go up to somebody and say, "Hey, let's open their airway, uh, make sure that they're in a recovery position so they can breathe on their own." Like, so this person's unconscious, and say they've been like shot in the chest, right? They have a heartbeat, they're not breathing. We're gonna decompress their chest. We're gonna put them in a recovery position. We're gonna insert an airway, um, and then we're gonna move on. And if they're still alive when we come back around to evacuate people, there'll be a red tag and we'll take them. And if they stop breathing or their heart stops beating, they're dead. And those are difficult decisions, right? Because if you just took everybody on that scene and started working on that one person, you could probably save their life. But
Yeah.
if you do that, you're going to sacrifice the lives of everybody else. And I sometimes think about black pilled people that way. To bring this around to what we were talking about, how much of our resources would we sacrifice by focusing in on a group of people who may very well already be lost?
No.
I think maybe what we should probably be focusing on is prevention and giving people who are at risk of going down that pathway off ramps. And then I'm not saying, by the way, if you're out there doing de-radicalization to stop. I don't want you to do that. I want those people out there, but I think that that is a very specialized, rarefied thing that needs to be approached with a certain level of understanding that that's what you're doing is a specialized skill, and I don't think that it should be something that most of us should. I just don't think it's something we should focus most of our energy or effort on.
No, I agree. I think
Yeah.
part of it, like, because that was what I mentioned is something that I mentioned at the very end, like, super end of pulling these people out. The main focus at the tail end and the tie up of the next video is how do we help children who are being exposed to this stuff and who are starting to
Yeah.
enter into these places. And my focus is mostly on positive male figures who can who can pull these kids and these young adults out of these spaces. But to do that, you have to have somebody positive. Like it's almost like an equation of sorts where and it's almost like a call to action for adults and parents. And part of the question that I keep asking myself is like who is responsible for all this? Who is responsible for the kids who are being exposed to the manosphere or to the doomer spaces or to places that are just super dark, right? Like is that on us, like as YouTubers and influencers, or is that like or is the responsibility on the parent, right?
Yeah.
So I'm grappling with this kind of situation and positive male figures, but also like father figures in itself. Because my essay on anime dads, which isn't really about anime dads, is mostly about the absent father figure in Japan that are being worked to such an extent that the house it seems like it's fatherless, right? So these kids grow up without fathers and they lack a community because now in Japan they're following the nuclear family model where
Hmm.
instead like back before World War One and Two, it was a communal uh, raising of the child. The community shouldered the burden and introduced this child to a variety of ideas. And so, what I'm pointing at is that this shift to huge amounts of work to make Japan succeed after World War Two causes a lot of Japanese people to enter doomer spaces. And this also kind of does relate to Americans as well, because parents here are also so into the grind culture that they don't really spend that much time or care or focus on what their children or young adults are actually consuming. So part of my video is how do we bring this attention to parents so that they in part can help their children or young adults. And it's such a tough thing to do because, like, I don't know who's gonna be watching my video. Like, I hope a parent watches it, but at the end of the day, I don't fully know who is watching it. So I'm still grappling with all of that and the solutions that we could bring to the table.
Yeah, and it's you know the I struggle with it on because there's two fronts to it, right? Like there's on the one hand, this I think by and large, the younger generation is wildly more progressive than any generation that came before it. And I think that ultimately a lot of um, the audience of these like right wing like influencers are fairly like a vocal minority. It's kind of niche, but on the other hand, we do need to combat it because one need only look at the chain of dominoes from Gamergate to Charlottesville
Yeah.
to see what happens when you don't address a very vocal but deeply fucked up minority of reactionaries. So I wonder at what we can or should do, um, and I to what extent can you create a system that is a counterbalance to that, and how much control can you have about whether or not the target audience engages with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't really know because a lot of that's ultimately going to come down to what's the most profitable.
Yeah.
Is
No.
the sad part of it.
No.
I guess maybe like I don't know. We need to make like wholesome shit more profitable. I don't know how to go about doing that. Um, like how do we like Care Bear capitalism? Oh god, wouldn't that be great? Like if we could just like have like Andrew Tate like in like the middle of a rant or something, and then all of a sudden like a bunch of like just like wholesome people just come up and give him a hug, and he like transforms into like I don't know, like Sailor Moon or something, and just and then it was over. And just Care Bear stare the red pill away.
You know what? That's gonna be in my next video.
Is it?
I'm gonna have, like, Care Bears just surrounding Tate because he is part of my video.
Nice.
I'm basically taking a lot of swings in this last part,
Mm,
and it's gonna be and I hope people see it. They are important swings, because the way I see it is that debate bro spaces are adding to toxic masculinity and toxic rhetoric of masculine spaces, right? This idea of the blood sport, this
yeah,
idea that you must win, that if you are looked weak in the debate, you are no longer seen as like a fit debater
yeah.
is something that I connect back to Theodore Roosevelt of all people,
Mm,
who who went out of his way to kind of categorize those who are fit for society and those who are unfit. And if you kind of look at that rhetoric, it also mirrors Jordan B. Peterson. Like
mhm,
he also is using this rhetoric of Roosevelt, whether he knows it or not, whether he knows history or not. But the idea of him looking at IQ and those who are fit for society and those who are unfit for society mirrors this toxic masculinity that Roosevelt used in some really dark shit here,
yeah.
but in finding the ideal worker, in finding the ideal American, in finding and restoring and rebooting American masculinity by using the frontier, by using methods of hunting. And
Mm,
those who are unfit for society in his way, he doesn't really say it out loud because he became the president of the United States, and he kind of mirrored his stances with progressiveness, right? Like huge quotes on progressiveness and what that means for Roosevelt. But for him, the unfit were to be sterilized and kicked out of society. And
mm,
so him and so I take Roosevelt and I apply it to 3 areas, right? I apply it to Japanese masculinity and how it's tied to work and the ideal Japanese man who listens to their bosses, goes through overwork, basically works themselves to death. And then I take that and I say, "Hey, this is also being spread by Peterson, Tate, and Debate Bros,
yeah.
who who at who at their level, you'd think Debate Bros are spreading the good shit. They're spreading leftist ideas. They're spreading all this stuff. And yet, right? And yet, how much how much are they over glorifying overwork in order to gain profit? How much are they spreading the ideal of the victor and those that win this debate, and those that are seen as manly in this spear fierce space, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I'm like, sure, guys, you guys are spreading some good shit sometimes. You are saying some good shit. But at the same time, you are also adding to this thing that is called the manosphere. You are still adding to the points that they are bringing on the table. And thus you have that the counterproductivity of debate bros and what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And can people come at me and argue with me and debate me that leftist YouTubers do this? Sure. Sure they can. But at the same time, it's about who takes up their wrongs, admits when they are defeated, admit when they screw it up or when they fucked up, and rights that wrong, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about for me. You know, there are countless times where essayists were like, I fucked up, I got this wrong, I'm gonna do better, and I'm gonna own up to it, right? Even me in my essay, my final point is I hope I am wrong because fuck it, man. Like I really hope I'm wrong about all this shit. I
Yeah.
don't want to be right about, fatherless homes, about Japanese workers who are working themselves to death. I don't want to be right about kids who are getting fucked up because of the Manosphere or Debate Bros or Andrew Tate or Peterson or wherever or whoever the hell it is, right?
Yeah.
I want to be wrong because if I am right, that means shit is fucked up.
Yeah. I I think the debate thing is it's it's so n- nebulous and hard to like because on the one hand, right, I do think that there is utility like just to like throw them all the bones that I'm capable of throwing them. I think that there is utility in being able to respond in real time to people making bad arguments. I think that is something that those of us on the left should probably, if we're going to be in the public sphere, we should be able to do that. Some of us should be able to do that. And I think that is a good skill set to have. The problem arises, the real problem arises when that, and this is, I think, this is what like John Duncan talked about in his video
Mm.
on the subject. When it becomes prioritized as not just a tactic for dealing with a specific scenario, but rather the primary mechanism of generating knowledge and defending knowledge, when it becomes your entire epistemology is whether or not you can big dick in a conversation. Like that's when it develops into a real fucking problem. And there's so many people for whom that is the way they interact with not only like their enemies, but people that would ostensibly be their allies. And just, it's just such a fucking toxic cesspool.
It is, yeah. And it's also draining
Mhm.
to those who are actually trying to work towards something better, to creating a community. When you have people sending other people after you and trying to dismantle the things that you are creating, like
Mm.
that is toxic, vile shit. And I'm sorry for swearing so much. You probably want to monetize this.
Nah, it's fine. I don't give a shit. I think I don't really know how the monetization thing works. I know that if you mention racism in the first 5 minutes, it limits it automatically. Because I've had that happen on two of them that I've monetized. But I think as long as you're okay
Were we
within,
good? I think we were good for the first 10 minutes.
yeah, yeah, I
I
think
think
I need to put that in my boilerplate
yeah, we
stuff
should do
too.
that. I wanted to tell you that to follow Turb's shout out to Turb, but Turb's
Yeah,
advice.
yeah. Everybody go subscribe to Turb too. Turb's dope. Um, but yeah, I think the way that it reads is it like really scans like the first 5 or 10 minutes heavily. So I think we're good. But even if we're not, like, I don't really give that much of a shit. Like, I'm, it's it is. Well, I guess like, because if you're up for limited monetization, it doesn't like boost you in the algorithm as much
That's true.
either.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
found.
I don't know. It's tricky. It's
It's okay.
tricky.
You could cut out if I did say any racist shit in the first 10 minutes. I mean, not racist shit, but like things that talk about race.
Yeah, I don't know. No, this is okay. Is this how it starts? Is this like is this my sellout arc? Um, be like, you can't say bad words, and then like before you know it, I'm like writing my own 5 rules for life or whatever.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I actually cleaned my room today just in case if you wanted me to hook up my webcam
Oh,
and
no, everything's a fucking
and
disaster
for
over
and
here.
I felt so great. Thank you so much, Jordan Peterson, for teaching me that life lesson that cleaning your room makes you feel good.
Yeah. I I do. So that's an interesting thing that I have noticed about like the monetization thing is like um it does like for instance, like I just said I'm probably going to change the way I do some stuff because of it. So it does impinge on you a little bit if you monetize your content to, and if you don't monetize your content, then you're never going to get popular because the algorithm prioritizes monetized content. So like it does impinge on like how you do things
Yeah,
pretty heavily. I think I haven't watched it yet, but I know FD just put out like a little clip on the B sides thing where he's like, my boss is a racist robot. I'll actually like I'll pull it up. Let me look at because I know that there's a couple of these I didn't even try to monetize at all. I was just like, I'm not even gonna bother. Um,
yeah.
Oh, it says roughly in the first 30 seconds for profanity. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Don't
I
I
don't
don't
quite believe that.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all.
No.
Is that the thing that you have to grade yourself?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I
Like
hate that thing.
you grade
I
yourself and yeah.
I give myself a pass every single time, and they're like, "Nope."
Yeah. I've successfully monetized all of my videos except
Nice.
for um the one with Chill Goblin and Hillary Aggro where we talk a lot about psychedelics. I went ahead and just set those to limited because I knew that was going to be what it did.
Yeah.
And then the one, let's see, it instantly demonetized or set to limited the one I did with Contraband about racism, and then the last conversation I had with Lua, um, also about racism,
Yeah.
and and for some reason the conversation I had with Frost, I don't know. Oh, and the one with yeah, it's pretty weird what it limits. I don't
Yeah.
really understand it.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, I tried to my 9/11 video, I was like, "Okay, I think this is professional enough to not get to not get demonetized or limited because it was written for a university course." But I guess in the first 30 seconds, I say the words that kill, and
Uh,
I was like, "Oh, right. Right, I did say that. I did say that. I wonder I wonder if that's what it is." It didn't actually tell me what it was, but
yeah.
instantly it was it was limited.
Yeah, that would be very helpful if they told you what it was, wouldn't it? But they don't want to make it too easy.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
or
even if it's limited, it still apparently does better than it when it's demonetized.
yeah, I haven't had one get like completely demonetized, and I'm actually surprised about that because at various points I say some wild shit on these episodes. So
Yeah.
we'll see how
Someday.
it.
Someday maybe this one.
Maybe this one.
Maybe this one.
Maybe this one. We'll see what happens. We haven't said anything too terrible. I don't I don't know. I don't know. What's the most like what's the hottest take you have? Let's see if we can get this demonetized.
Oh, man. Okay, here it is. I was so happy when I learned how Theodore Roosevelt died and the reason for it. I legitimately jumped in joy when I read that, and I said, "Geez, that's a way to die, and I'm glad that you're in the box."
I don't. I have no idea how Theodore Roosevelt died. How'd that?
He died from a blood clot because he went into, like, the Amazon rainforest to find
Hmm.
something, but apparently when he was in there, he got infected by something. So in his sleep, he got a blood clot and he just died
From
because
like a
because
stroke or a heart attack or like what?
I don't know, I think from a heart attack? I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. But it's so funny because he's so into, like, going into the wild is gonna make you manlier, going into the wild is gonna save the men, going into wild eventually killed Theodore Roosevelt.
Ah,
There's part like, I know there's part of my script that I cut out. I wanna when I put this video on Patreon, it's gonna be in it, but it's about me, like it's a clip of me digging in the ground, digging up Theodore Roosevelt to to and it's like this unhinged version of me, like, basically shaking him, asking him why he went to Africa, asking him why he killed the elephants, and that I'm gonna question him about the frontier,
you know,
about Africa,
put him
about
on trial like he's
about
a
white
dead pope.
supremacy, and I explicitly state that I'm gonna chain him up in my basement so that he doesn't go back to Africa to hunt the elephants.
I think. Uh, I think my hottest take is probably that I think we should dig up James Madison and make a flute out of his tibia and give it to Lizzo to play. Which by the time this comes out, they'll have moved on to something else egregious or some other like stupid culture war shit to the right right wing will. But yeah, I think actually yeah, screw that. Like I think we should just like dig up
Woo.
like that's the what is that the canard about like well if you tear down statues of slave owners you should tear down statues of the founding fathers. Yeah, fuck them, I don't care,
Yeah,
I don't give
man.
a shit, I don't fuck those people.
Man.
Like all of them were just the least bad evil people at the time and they weren't even that less bad. Like
And
if you own slaves you don't get a statue.
yeah.
That's how I feel about you, fuck them.
And what's interesting is that, like, I found when I did research for this video, they were like, "Yeah, but Roosevelt was racist because he was a man of his time. He talked about the eradication of the indigenous people because he was a man of his time." And then there's a legit quote of him talking about those who are against the eradication of indigenous people, who are against racism, saying that if you do not believe in the settlement of the West, you do not believe in our founding fathers. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? A man of his time? The man is legitimately talking about anti-racist and anti-eradication people who are against Indian wars. And
Yeah,
I'm just standing there like, I'm like, yes, they're so right. They To be against colonization is to be against the founding father and the settlement of the West. Like, what the hell are you talking about? You do not belong here in America. But you're placing it like it's such a baffling idea for these people to say that when it's like, yeah, man, they're speaking truth. Like, what the hell are you guys doing there? What the
yeah,
hell you like? What the hell do you think you're doing that is right?
yeah. I think one of the that is like a so I do try to use a term that I heard FD say a lot, and I'm going to try to start adopting. Is I do try to like hold space for like people who were just culturally indoctrinated into a time period where like like it's you're it's still bad, but like it's that's what a lot of people in their time period thought. On the other hand, there were still abolitionists. There were people saying like, "No,
Yeah.
this is pretty fucked up. We shouldn't be doing this." So, um, for
Well,
yeah.
yeah,
So I think that's just how people were back then is a pretty not great excuse for most bad behavior.
yeah.
Yeah. My
And part of
personal go ahead.
oh no, go you got
I was gonna say like my personal favorite example of that is H.P. Lovecraft,
oh yeah.
who or if you've ever read any of his writing, is not. not a good guy. He's also like, I will admit, like was at one point one of my favorite authors, and like we owe a huge debt to him in terms of like modern science fiction and horror and like urban fantasy. Like if there was no HP Lovecraft, we never would have gotten Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Oh,
right? Like
100%. Yeah.
however, HP Lovecraft was one of the most viciously racist human beings who ever lived, and he wasn't even like good for his time. Like in 1920, people were like, "Bro, you need to chill with this racism. You need to tone it down." Like people were aghast at his behavior in the 1920s in New York. Like he was a
Yeah.
really bad guy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, actually, that might explain why Roosevelt partly went to Africa, because if he did actually, do what he wanted to do to African Americans in the States, people would have looked at him like he's a madman. What
Mm,
he did in Africa was he basically rode on the backs of African people. And there's
Jesus
footage
Christ.
there is footage of this man riding on Africans, letting them cross a river for him, right? Because he doesn't want to cross the river. He lets them cross the river. And the way I see it is that like these servants, right? Like quotations on the servants, because
Yeah.
they weren't really seen as his servants. The way that I see it is that he was a supporter of slavery, and partially why he went to Africa was to experience what his forefathers experienced.
Uh,
That's how fucked up these racists were in the early 1900s. In Africa, the Philippines, Hawaii, Latin America became like this new frontier for a lot of these white men to go out there and to express their racism by using the natives in such a way and basically replaying what occurred in America. So it gets this essay gets so dark. Like
yeah.
there are times where I'm like, oh, fuck. How do I? Why is it always got to be so dark?
I mean, and that's something you run into. Just that happens. Everything old is new again. Like history rhymes. Like that same shit happened with like the Rhodesian Civil War and like what eventually became Zimbabwe. Like you had
Yeah,
um like many a young white American, British, South African, Australian man went to what is now Zimbabwe to specifically with the goal of shooting Africans
yeah,
because they could get away with it. Yeah,
yeah. Another example is something that I threw at foreign. This was back when I was in masters and I couldn't make essays. It was the clip of the royals riding on the backs of the people. I don't know which island it was, but they were riding on the back, like they were being carried by these people. And there's a clip of them just sitting back as royalty being carried by these people. And I threw it at foreign, and I'm like, man, you got to make a video on the royals. Like,
yeah.
like this stuff better than me, but this is disgusting. And when I saw it with Roosevelt, I was like, wow, this mirrors the exact same thing.
But yeah, I mean that's ultimately like that's like a weird like I don't know like it's not quite like Foucault's boomerang. It's like the like almost like the opposite of it. It's like it's not colonialism returning home. It's like, oh well, we can't do colonialism at home anymore. Let's go for a field trip and like redo it. Let's like let's go do terrible shit. I mean, I guess that's just colonialism. Like there's really nothing else to it. It's just making sport of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's fucked up and awful.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay. What else can we do? I'm just like thinking about like turning this episode into a test case because we're getting pretty close to like where like I normally end a show. So like what are like what's the worst shit we can say at the end of this that will get me demonetized but not cause me to lose fans? Like,
Okay, we gotta talk about shittiest animes ever.
okay, all right,
I think
yeah, well, that's your wheelhouse.
can
I will
can it?
listen.
I don't know if that would do it though.
Mm, I
You'd
don't
have
know.
if you want to get demonetized. You know what you do?
What?
You put an anime clip into your video, and guess what will happen?
Uh, right, yeah, so I don't wanna get, like, copyright
No,
demonetized.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But
Yeah.
what happens is that worldwide it gets limited. Like that's how bad the demonetized police with anime gets.
What, like, why is that? Is it just
I
because
I don't
copyright, or is it just, like, anime is just seen as, like, just no, like, "Oh, okay, it's a cartoon," and like, we know how the people who watch this stuff are.
Oh,
Like,
I guess that's how it was, but this was not a clip of it all.
oh,
It was just like a clip of like it was like a it's a clip explaining how Japan gets taken over by aliens,
mm,
and it's just like 10 seconds. It wasn't anything like there wasn't actually anything in it,
hmm,
but maybe, I don't know.
yeah,
But it
uh,
that was like the first time where one of my videos got like worldwide demonetized. Like I
okay,
couldn't show it anywhere.
so no anime. No anime, you can't talk about anti-racism, um, okay, well, I mean, that's basically everything. Like, I don't there's nothing else to talk about besides those 2 subjects, right? Like, it's just
Maybe like
everything's hmm,
I think also like suicide
yeah, yeah,
and
that's
mental health gets it.
yeah,
I think also drinks, like like actual like alcoholic drinks
huh,
gets
I
like
yeah,
there's a video done by Mia Mulder
yeah,
where she talks about drinks, like quote
yeah,
drinks,
yeah,
where she has to every time she talks about like like drinks, she talks about like juice.
yeah, yeah,
Because if she does talk about alcoholic drinks, YouTube would just demonetize it and cancel it.
yeah, that's interesting, well, she's also, like, in that video, like, I mean, at this point, like, I don't really care. I think that she's talking about, like, drugs though, right? Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah, maybe it was also
yeah,
drugs.
yeah,
Right,
like, in that video, she's specifically talking about, like, various, like, illegal drugs, and
right, yeah,
it'll get demonetized
it
for it.
was drugs too, right,
Which,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, I'm sure I have several of the videos that I have that are demonetized, or just because, like, I'm, pretty radical, drugs should be legal, and I'm actually at the point now where I think, like, I think not only should drugs be legal, but I think they should be free. Like
Yeah,
I think, like, you should just be able to, like, if you like, all of the problems associated with drug abuse are social problems that if we lived in a functioning society, you're it wouldn't matter, right? Like, there'll always be some number of the population who's not gonna wanna do anything other than get high all day, and I don't really give a shit. Like, just let those people have, like, a house to do it in and give them clean drugs so they don't overdose and overburden the healthcare system. And if they wanna get clean, we have resources for that too. But for everybody else, you're gonna use drugs anyway. Here's shit that we know is not, tainted, and if you wanna use it in front of a medical professional, here you go. Like, yeah, that's what I think the FDA, or that's what I think the Drug Enforcement Agency should be doing, is just providing clean clean drugs. Like, we should just have, that's my hot take on the DEA, is that we should keep it, but its entire job should be distribution.
yeah,
Alright, well, that definitely got the video demonetized.
definitely.
Yeah,
Sorry, rest in peace
yeah,
video.
RIP. Um RIP my no, it's great because, like, I think I've made, like, 2 cents on YouTube in the last week, so it's fine.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I made like, 10 bucks,
nice.
but
Nice.
I haven't gotten the pin letter from YouTube. Like, they sent it out, but I haven't received it.
The what letter?
They send you this letter to enter your PIN to get the AdSense,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it could be checked out into your bank account. I didn't receive the letter, so I don't know what is up with my $10. Like, Do they stay? Do they go away?
I'm just going to convert it to
Like
crypto and
like does YouTube after a number of days be like, "Oh, by the way, we took away your $10 because we couldn't give it to you." And I want to buy some ice cream with this
yeah,
$10, you know. Like I worked hard for this $10.
yeah, right. Uh, uh
Uh,
I think I don't know. That might be a good spot to end it on. Is here's to everybody hoping you get your $10
oh, I
from
hope.
YouTube.
I think
Um,
I think after working on it's been like 3 months now,
yeah,
probably. I started realizing that I shouldn't be doing this all for free. Um,
yeah.
like just now, I was like, you know what? This AdSense may never come to me, and I may never buy my ice cream. So I'm working like week on and weekend on this video to never get my $10 to buy ice cream.
Oh man. Well, hopefully, like, you have a Patreon, right?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay, all right. Well, everybody go to to Lost Futures Patreon. There'll be a link in the show notes and help him get his ice cream.
Please, I've been
Because
desperately wanting to buy a cone of ice cream.
all right, ab- absolutely. Do you like you want to plug all your stuff and plug all your pluggables where everybody can find you?
Sure, you could find me on Lost Futures One on Twitter, where I basically post random stuff that people seem to enjoy. I think my YouTube is just Lost Futures. You'll probably find my Attack on Titan video first, so don't watch that one. Instead, watch something else because because that video has a lot of toxic comments.
All right. Well, Ibrahim, Lost Futures. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure,
so
man.
much for having me on, man. It's a lot of fun.
Hey there, folks. Mark Edwards again. I just wanted to thank you for watching or listening, however it is that you get this content. And yeah, thanks. If you would like to support the show financially, you can do so by becoming a patron. I am trying to get better about uploading the audio of these early for patrons, and I will try to come up with other benefits for folks as well. But for the time being, you'll definitely get your name over here in the part where I put people's names up, and have the joy of knowing that you support me and what I do and my eternal love and gratitude, which, you know, isn't that enough for anybody? If you don't want to become a monthly subscriber, you can always give me a one-time tip via PayPal, Venmo, Coffee. All of that stuff is at UltravioletPod. Please be sure and support my guests as well. Ibrahim has a Patreon, which will be linked in the down there part, along with all his other stuff that you can check out. And if you can't afford to support me financially, don't worry about it. I totally get it. I've been in a situation where that was not possible for me. But you can still help the show. You can support me by liking and subscribing, by hitting the bell to get a notification whenever I publish a video like this one that will almost certainly be limited or demonetized, and so the algorithm will not promote it. You can share my content on your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram page, wherever you have an audience. Go out and give me a 5-star review on the podcast apps. Currently, there are only 3 people who have reviewed the show on iTunes, and I think I'm 2 of them from Sock Puppet accounts. So it would really help me if y'all would go out there and at least rate it like 5 stars or something and leave a review. That really does help get the word out. So that would be helpful, and I would appreciate it, and you would get my endless gratitude. If you would like to engage with me on social media, you can do so on Twitter at UltravioletPod. I'm also on Instagram under the same handle, but I don't really post there very frequently. It's mostly just pictures of my cat. R.I.P. F's in chat for the bestest stinky boy who ever lived. He is unfortunately no longer with us. but you can bask in his glory in my Instagram account if you so choose. Occasionally I'm on Twitch at UVPod. I don't really go on there much, but I do play games occasionally sometimes, so if that's what you're into, feel free to throw me a subscription there, and you'll sometimes catch me playing whatever I'm doing in the moment. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's all the standard outro stuff that I normally do, and didn't script this one, so just gonna leave. Bye.